What if the voice in your head, like the one that literally never stops narrating or worrying or plotting and complaining, what if that isn't actually who you are?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's a terrifying thought, honestly.
Right. What if the entity you refer to as I, when you're just, thinking to yourself, is actually a kind of imposter, like an imposter that has systematically taken over human consciousness?
It forces a complete recalibration of reality, just to even entertain that premise.
Totally.
Because we spend our entire lives uh, basically assuming that this constant churning internal monologue is the core of our identity. We trust it, we obey it.
We let it completely dictate our moods.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
let it dictate our emotional state. So to suggest that this voice is, well, not only separate from our true self, but is actually a psychological parasite operating on its own agenda,
Yeah.
it's deeply unsettling. I mean, it strips away the very foundation of how we perceive our own minds.
It fundamentally destabilizes everything you think you know about yourself right out of the gate. And exploring that destabilization is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to the Book Nook, a community dedicated to exploring the most impactful and transformative books in self-help, spirituality, psychology, and personal growth.
I am so excited for this one.
Me too. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a modern spiritual classic. We're unpacking Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose.
Yes, and specifically, we are anchoring this deep dive in the 2008 Oprah's Book Club reprint.
Oh, yeah, the iconic one.
Right. For anyone who was in a bookstore or even just a coffee shop around that time, the visual is permanently burned into your memory.
That glowing orange and blue cover.
Exactly. It was ubiquitous. I mean, it wasn't just a bestseller. It became this massive cultural phenomenon because it articulated a sense of collective exhaustion, really, that people were feeling but just didn't have the vocabulary to express.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission for our deep dive today is pretty ambitious.
It really is.
We are going to decode Tolle's framework for human consciousness, explore the hidden, almost mechanical structure of what he calls the ego that dictates our daily lives, and discover how to step out of that relentless noise of our own minds and into a state of pure presence.
Which is easier said than done, obviously.
Oh, way easier said than done. But to you, the listener, I really want to frame the stakes right now. Whether you are feeling completely overwhelmed by your own endless thoughts, or maybe you're caught in a cycle of needing more just to feel normal.
That constant wanting.
Or even if you're just intensely curious about finding a deeper sense of unshakable peace, this conversation is custom tailored to help you reclaim the territory of your own mind.
But, to even begin discussing how to reclaim the mind, we have to first establish the context of the environment we're operating in.
Right.
We really have to examine the collective madness that we've all inherited. Because Tolle doesn't just treat the ego as, like, an individual quirk, right? He frames it as a historical and evolutionary condition.
Yeah, and he opens the book with this incredibly vivid, almost cinematic image to illustrate that concept of evolutionary leaps. So he asks us to imagine Earth roughly 114 million years ago.
A very long time ago.
Just a bit. And the planet has been covered in dense, heavy, green vegetation for millions of years. It's entirely earthbound, just heavy matter. But on one specific morning, after millions of years of just biological stagnation, the very first flower opens up to receive the rays of the sun.
Wow.
It's this profound shift in the biological fabric of the planet.
He uses the emergence of flowers alongside the evolution of things like birds and crystals to represent what he terms an enlightenment of the plant, animal, and mineral realms.
Okay, and enlightenment, what does he mean by that?
Well, what requires close attention here is his definition of it. He describes it as a lessening of materiality, like a decrease in density.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at a lump of coal, right, it is dense, it's opaque, and it absorbs light. But under immense geological pressure over a huge amount of time, its molecular structure shifts.
It becomes a diamond.
Exactly. It becomes transparent, less dense, and capable of transmitting light. The substance itself hasn't vanished, but its relationship to light and density has fundamentally transformed.
That is such a cool way to look at it, because if we follow that logic, reptiles, which are incredibly earthbound, heavy, gravity-bound creatures, eventually grew feathers, they hollowed out their bones, and they became birds.
Right.
They literally defied the physical gravity that had held their ancestors down for millions of years.
Yeah, they took to the sky.
So it makes you wonder, if the enlightenment of a reptile is to defy physical gravity, maybe human enlightenment is the process of us defying the psychological gravity of our own heavy, materialistic, fear-based thoughts.
What's fascinating here is how that analogy cuts right to the core of his thesis. Because humanity, according to the framework Tolle builds, is completely weighed down by that psychological gravity right now.
We are so heavy right now.
We really are. He argues that we are actually suffering from an inherited dysfunction, like a collective insanity that we just mistakenly assume is normal human nature.
Right, we just think, oh, this is how people are.
Exactly. And the most disturbing part of his diagnosis is that our incredible evolutionary intelligence, our capacity for science, engineering, complex systems, it hasn't cured this madness.
No, not
It
me.
has only amplified it to an apocalyptic scale.
Yeah, he points directly to the 20th century as the undeniable proof of this dysfunction. As a species, we figured out the mechanics of the combustion engine, right? We figured out the splitting of the atom.
Brilliant discoveries.
Incredible intelligence. But we used that brilliant intelligence to invent machine guns, submarines, poison gas, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
He lists the horrors of trench warfare in World War I, the systemic industrialized tragedy of the Holocaust, the millions who died in the Soviet Union under Stalin's regime, the killing fields of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia.
It's just devastating.
It is. And, just to be absolutely clear to you listening, we are impartially reporting Tolle's psychological and historical framework here. This is not a political statement endorsing or condemning specific left or right ideologies.
Right, we're remaining totally neutral on the politics.
Exactly. This is simply an examination of his diagnosis of a human disease. He is arguing that humanity's historical record reads less like a story of progress and more like a clinical case history of chronic paranoid delusions and extreme violence against perceived enemies.
It's a very sobering perspective. He is essentially saying that these historical atrocities are not political anomalies.
Right, they aren't glitches in the matrix.
No, they are the exact same mechanisms of the individual ego. Fear, greed, the desire to dominate, the desperate need to be right, but simply magnified by millions of people and equipped with advanced technology.
That is terrifying when you put it that way.
And to understand how deeply embedded this is, Tolle looks at the etymology of ancient spiritual concepts. Take the word sin, for example.
Okay.
In its original ancient Greek context in the New Testament, sin was not a moral condemnation. It wasn't like a permanent stain on an eternal soul.
Which is how most of us understand it today.
Exactly. But originally, it was a term used in archery that literally meant to miss the mark.
Oh, wow. I find that reframe incredibly helpful, because if to sin just means to miss the mark, then we aren't talking about inherent evil, right?
Right.
We are talking about a tragic lack of skill. We live blindly, we operate unconsciously, and as a result, we cause massive suffering to ourselves and others simply because we are missing the fundamental point of human existence.
He parallels this beautifully with the Eastern concept of Maya, which translates to the veil of delusion.
Right, Mara.
So the underlying truth in both the Greek and Hindu concepts is identical. Our default, normal state of mind is dysfunctional. It is operating under a severe distortion.
Yeah.
And this is also where Tolle draws a very sharp boundary between true spirituality and organized religion.
Oh, that's an important distinction.
Very important. He notes that many religions were founded by early awakened teachers who saw this human dysfunction with absolute clarity. But as centuries passed, the institutions built around those original teachings were often co-opted.
The ego.
Exactly. The human ego hijacked these spiritual truths to enhance its own false sense of self. It transformed fluid, beautiful teachings into rigid, divisive ideologies used to justify us versus them mentalities.
Which is exactly what causes all the wars.
Right. Though, he makes sure to point out, the original truth still survives at the core of these traditions if you possess the clarity to look past the institutional dogma.
But, this is where I have to pause and push back on Tolle's overarching premise a little bit.
Go for it.
Is humanity truly criminally insane with a few brief, lucid intervals, as he claims? I mean, if we look at evolutionary biology, we are hardwired to survive at all costs.
True.
The brain evolved to constantly scan for threats, to hoard resources for the winter, to tribalize for protection from other groups. If my ancestors didn't have a deep-seated fear of outsiders and a greed for extra food, they would have died and I wouldn't be here.
That's a fair point.
So is this madness really a spiritual disease, or is it just our biological survival mechanism operating exactly as it was designed to?
It is a vital distinction to make, and you are entirely correct about the biological imperative.
Right.
I mean, the physical organism must survive, and it absolutely requires those mechanisms to do so.
Right.
However, Tolle's argument hinges on a very specific evolutionary misstep.
Which is?
The ego takes that legitimate biological survival mechanism, which is meant to protect the physical body from a lion or from starvation, and it applies it to a psychological sense of self.
Oh, I see.
The mind creates an abstract concept of who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and then the brain reacts to threats against that abstract concept as if they were physical threats.
Wow.
Your ego feels like it will literally face biological death if you lose a debate at a dinner party,
Oh my gosh.
or if your neighbor buys a more expensive car, or if someone insults your taste in music.
Mm-hmm.
Your body reacts with cortisol and adrenaline. That is where the insanity lies.
So the hardware is functioning perfectly, but the software has a massive bug. The threat detection system is firing off all this adrenaline and cortisol, not because a tiger is in the room, but because someone didn't like our post on social media.
Precisely. The intelligence of the human mind is cognitively extraordinary, but when it is commandeered by this phantom ego that's desperately trying to ensure its psychological survival, that brilliant intelligence is put into the service of madness.
It totally warps everything.
It really does. And this actually explains the failure of utopian movements throughout history.
Like communism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you attempt to create a perfect society entirely through external systemic changes, like the original, arguably noble egalitarian ideals of early communism, it inevitably collapses into tyranny or corruption.
Right, because you haven't fixed the people.
Because it addresses the external structure while completely ignoring the internal blueprint of human dysfunction. You just cannot construct a peaceful, equitable society out of individuals who are still internally governed by egoic fear, lack, and the desire to dominate.
That makes total sense. It's like you can design the most structurally sound blueprint for a house imaginable, but if you insist on building it out of rotting wood, the house will still collapse.
The materials themselves are compromised.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this and wondering, why this sweeping historical theory matters for your Tuesday morning commute, it's because recognizing this collective madness is the absolute prerequisite to escaping it.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot wake up from a nightmare if you don't even realize you were asleep in the first place.
The recognition itself is the intervention. To see the insanity as insanity is the dawn of sanity.
So if we accept that this collective dysfunction is a kind of psychological disease, we need to isolate the virus.
Mm-hmm.
What is the specific contagion that spreads this madness?
Well, according to Tolle, it is a word we use thousands of times a day without a second thought.
The word I.
Yes, it is the word I. This requires us to look under the hood at the actual architecture of the ego.
Let's clearly define what Tolle means by ego, because I think in our standard cultural lexicon, an ego just means someone is arrogant, right? Like they're boastful, or they think too highly of themselves.
Right, like an egomaniac.
Exactly. But Tolle is pointing to a much deeper structural phenomenon. He defines the ego as an entirely illusory sense of self. It is a mental construct generated by our relentless identification with form.
And form is a broad category here.
Right. By form, he doesn't just mean physical shapes. He means any distinct entity. Our passing thoughts, our physical possessions, our gender, our nationality, our career title, our social standing.
And the mechanics of this are hidden in plain sight, particularly if you trace the etymology of the word identification.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
It originates from the Latin phrase idem facere, which translates literally to make the same.
You make the same.
This is a crucial concept. When we identify with something, we are psychologically making it the same as our core sense of I. We take an inanimate object, a transient emotion, or an abstract concept, and we neurologically fuse it with our fundamental sense of existence. We endow the object with our selfhood.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because to illustrate just how pervasive and unnoticed this mechanism is, Tolle shares a story from his time as a university student in London that is deeply unsettling when you really analyze it.
Oh, the story on the tube.
Yes. So he is riding the tube, the subway system, and sitting across from him is a woman who is visibly suffering from severe mental illness. She is talking out loud, completely consumed in a furious, aggressive argument with an invisible enemy.
Right.
She is yelling things like, "How dare you accuse me? I trusted you. You betrayed me." She is trapped in a full sensory simulation of a conflict that isn't actually happening in the physical world around her.
And Tolle, out of a mix of concern and curiosity, ends up following her at a distance after they disembark.
Mm.
He wonders where someone in such a disconnected state could possibly be navigating to.
Yeah.
To his profound shock, she walks confidently into the administration building of the University of London, perfectly navigating the physical environment despite her mental state.
She knew exactly where she was going physically.
Exactly. And shortly after, Tolle is washing his hands in a nearby restroom, reflecting on the tragic nature of her condition, and he suddenly catches himself.
Oh, this is the kicker.
He realizes he is muttering his own anxious, stressful thoughts out loud. The epiphany hits him. His own silent internal monologue is structurally identical to the madness of the woman on the train.
Wow.
The only difference is one of degree and volume. Hers is spoken out loud and fueled by aggressive paranoia. His is silent and fueled by low-grade anxiety. But both are instances of a human being totally possessed by a voice in the head.
Think about the sheer amount of cognitive energy that requires. We spend our days simulating arguments we haven't had yet, reliving embarrassments from a decade ago, and defending our imaginary self against imaginary threats.
It's exhausting.
We are entirely possessed by this narrator. And this narrator desperately needs material to build its identity, which is where it starts attaching itself to things. If you want to see the ego's identification process industrialized, just look at the modern advertising industry.
Absolutely.
They rarely sell you the actual utility of a product anymore. They sell you an identity enhancer.
Right.
The subtext of the commercial isn't, "This car will transport you efficiently." The subtext is, "If you purchase this specific luxury vehicle, you will finally stand out, you will command respect, you will be more."
Advertisers are essentially hacking the ego's fundamental structural flaw.
Mm.
Because the ego operates on a permanent baseline frequency of not enough.
Never enough.
Yeah, because it is a phantom, right? A mental concept. It has no actual substance. Therefore, it constantly feels like it is on the verge of disappearing, which creates a deep psychological lack. To compensate, it equates having with being.
Having equals being.
The subconscious logic is, I have, therefore I am. If I have more, I will be more. This psychological void is then displaced into the physical world. And Tolle makes a brilliant comparison here, linking this dynamic to eating disorders like bulimia.
Oh, this comparison blew my mind.
In bulimia, a deep psychological hunger-like, a desperate need for control or fulfillment is displaced onto physical food. The person eats relentlessly, but because the hunger isn't actually physical, the food can never satisfy it.
Right.
Consumerism operates on the exact same structural pathology, just played out on a macroeconomic scale. We try to fill a spiritual and psychological void with physical commodities, and we are baffled when the satisfaction evaporates 10 minutes after unboxing the item.
It's so true. The cancer cell metaphor is highly appropriate here, too. I mean, a cancer cell's only biological directive is to multiply and grow. It consumes resources relentlessly for the sake of its own expansion, completely blind to the fact that by doing so, it is actively destroying the host organism it relies on for its very survival.
That's a chilling comparison, but accurate.
The ego operates identically. It's endless striving for economic growth, for having more territory, more wealth, and more control, is systematically destroying the ecological host, the planet, that sustains our physical lives.
It is a fatal flaw in the operating system, and Tolle exposes the sheer absurdity of this flaw by examining the paradox of ownership.
Oh, I love this part.
Think about the concept of owning land. Imagine you are standing in Manhattan, pointing to a massive steel and glass skyscraper and declaring, "That is mine." What's actually happening neurologically?
You're just making it up.
You are taking the mental concept of I and the physical concept of skyscraper and weaving them together in your neural pathways. If you can convince the collective society to agree with your mental fusion, they will give you signed pieces of paper deeds and titles to validate the hallucination.
The hallucination, that's exactly what it is.
But on a fundamental existential level, what does a signed piece of paper or a pile of steel have to do with the conscious awareness that you are? Absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
The moment you are on your deathbed, the neurological fusion breaks down. The concept of owning a building evaporates, revealing it was only ever a thought form you were clinging to.
He illustrates this with a genuinely moving anecdote from his time working as a counselor. He was visiting a school teacher who was in the final stages of terminal cancer.
Oh, this story is heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time.
It really is. So he arrives at her home one afternoon, and she is in a state of absolute furious distress. A diamond ring that had belonged to her grandmother had disappeared, and she was entirely convinced that her hired caretaker had stolen it.
She was devastated.
She was. And it wasn't about the financial value of the diamond. The ego had woven her sense of lineage, her memory of her grandmother, and her own identity into the atomic structure of that piece of jewelry.
Now, many people would try to comfort her by offering to call the police or, help search the house. But Tolle, recognizing the egoic mechanism causing her acute suffering, instead asks her a series of very direct, probing questions.
Which is pretty bold to do to a dying woman.
It is. But he asks, do you realize that given your medical condition, you will have to let go of this ring and everything else in a matter of weeks anyway?
Wow.
When you inevitably let go of it, will you actually become less? Has the essence of who you are been diminished in any way by the absence of this object?
That is such a piercing intervention. And according to Tolle, after a few moments of silence, the woman's entire demeanor shifted. The anger dissolved, and she actually smiled. In that moment of deep introspection, she realized that while her mind was frantically screaming that she had been robbed and diminished, she could tune into her pure I amness, her baseline state of conscious being, and she felt it was completely intact.
We should unpack what I amness actually means here, because it can sound overly mystical to some people.
Definitely. What is it, practically?
Phenomenologically, I amness is the raw sensation of existing before you attach any labels to it. If you close your eyes and forget your name, your past, your bank account, your diagnosis, there is still an undeniable alert presence looking out from behind your eyes.
Just that feeling of being awake.
Exactly. That raw, unlabeled awareness is the I amness. The dying woman suddenly felt that presence and realized the ring was never a part of it. The ring was merely a physical object that her mind had attached the label mine to.
And once that neurological link was severed, the relief was immediate. In her final weeks, she experienced a profound peace. She actually spent her remaining time giving away most of her remaining possessions, radiating joy because she was no longer identifying with them.
It completely freed her.
And the almost comedic twist to the story. After she passed away, her family found the diamond ring sitting in her bathroom medicine cabinet.
Oh, that's wild.
The theft was an entire fabrication of her ego to justify its outrage.
It perfectly highlights the ego's addiction to grievance. It just wanted a reason to be mad.
But I want to pause here and challenge the practical application of this. Let's say I save up and buy a really high-end, meticulously engineered espresso maker.
Okay, sure.
I don't buy it to show off. I buy it because I genuinely appreciate the craftsmanship, the mechanics of water pressure, and I love the ritual of a perfect cup of coffee.
Sounds lovely.
Right. Is Tolle saying that my appreciation for that machine is my ego? Am I identifying with the coffee maker just by owning it and enjoying it? Where's the line between practical enjoyment and egoic identification?
That is a critical nuance, and Tolle is not advocating for asceticism where we all sit in empty rooms staring at the wall. We inhabit a physical, material world. We require tools, shelter, clothing, transportation.
We have to live.
Exactly. It is entirely possible and even healthy to appreciate a well-crafted object. You can honor the quality, the engineering, and the utility of the espresso maker. The transition into egoic identification happens not in the purchasing of the object, but in how you use the object to construct your sense of self.
Okay, so how do I know if I'm doing that?
The diagnostic questions to ask yourself are, do you subtly feel a sense of superiority over your neighbor who drinks instant coffee?
Ouch.
Do you find ways to casually name-drop the brand of your espresso maker when guests come over, specifically to elevate your perceived worth in their eyes?
Oh, wow.
Or if a friend accidentally knocked the machine off the counter and shattered it, would you simply assess the practical reality of needing to replace a tool? Or would you feel a surge of intense personal rage as if a part of your actual body had been assaulted?
That is such a good test.
It is never the object itself that is the problem. It is the invisible, sticky, psychological attachment you form to it.
That distinction changes everything. It's not about the stuff. It's about what the stuff is doing for your internal narrative. I want you, listener, to run a quick diagnostic on your own environment right now. Just mentally scan the room you are currently in.
Take a look around.
Look at your bookshelves, your technology, your art on the walls, your wardrobe. Which of those items do you genuinely feel define your personality? What would happen to your internal sense of stability and self-worth if a fire wiped them all out tomorrow? Would you still know who you are?
It's a highly confronting exercise.
Extremely confronting. And as we move forward in Tolle's framework, it becomes clear that the ego's clinginess isn't limited to physical possessions. While it uses objects to build its identity, it relies on something much more volatile for its actual nourishment. It clings fiercely to emotional trauma and drama.
Which transitions us perfectly into what might be the most paradigm-shifting concept in the entire book, the pain body.
Yes, the pain body. What is it?
Toll defines the pain body as the accumulated residue of old emotional pain that you have experienced but failed to fully process or let go of. It pulls together and lives inside your psychological structure as a semi-autonomous entity.
Like a gremlin living inside you?
He describes it almost as an invisible parasite made entirely of negative emotional energy. And like any living organism in nature, it has one primary directive. It needs to feed in order to survive and grow.
So what does it eat? What is its food source?
It feeds exclusively on its own frequency reactivity, interpersonal drama, and negative looping thoughts.
The way Tolle illustrates this is brilliant, using a highly observant comparison between humans and ducks.
The duck analogy is the best.
If you've ever watched ducks on a pond, occasionally two of them will cross paths and get into a sudden, vicious squabble. They snap their beaks, they flap around, they create a huge commotion. But it only lasts for about 5 seconds.
Right, very brief.
Then they separate. Crucially, they both flap their wings vigorously a few times, which is a biological mechanism to discharge the excess fight-or-flight energy from their nervous system, and then they float off in opposite directions, completely peaceful, as if the fight never happened.
It's the perfect model of experiencing an emotion, processing the physiological response, and returning to a baseline of presence.
Exactly. But what do humans do? We take that exact same 5-second squabble, but we've grown a human mind inside the duck.
A very loud mind.
We don't flap our wings and let it go. We swim away, but in our minds, the fight is just beginning. We start looping the narrative. I can't believe he snapped at me. Who does he think he is? He always does this. Next time I see him, I'm going to wait until he turns his back, and then...
It's exhausting just hearing it.
We take a transient moment of conflict, and we artificially sustain it in our minds for days, months, or even decades. We carry the past with us like a heavy anchor.
And this carrying of the past is deeply intertwined with how the ego plays roles in our daily lives. The ego is constantly scanning the environment to figure out how it can extract its needs. Whether that need is attention, power, or a sense of superiority.
Right.
We unconsciously slip into these roles. We play the victim because eliciting sympathy is a highly effective way of extracting attention from others. And to the ego, attention is a form of energy.
We feed on it.
We play the villain or the intimidator to extract a sense of power and control over our environment. We even play the overly romantic, self-sacrificing lover to manipulate someone else into completing our own lacking sense of self.
It's so manipulative.
And we act out these scripts completely unconsciously, driven entirely by the pain body's relentless hunt for a fresh meal of emotional drama.
There is a legendary Zen story that perfectly encapsulates the absurdity of how much dead weight the human mind carries. 2 monks, Tanzan and Aikido, are walking down a country road after a heavy rain.
I love this story.
The road is completely washed out and turned into deep, thick mud. At a crossing, they encounter a young woman dressed in a beautiful, delicate silk kimono. She is distressed because she cannot cross without ruining her clothes.
Right.
Without a single word of hesitation, Tanzan walks over, picks the woman up in his arms, carries her across the muddy stretch, and gently sets her down on dry land. The 2 monks then continue their journey in absolute silence for several hours.
For hours.
Hours. Finally, as they approach their temple, Aikido can't contain himself anymore. He explodes in rage. He yells at Tanzan, "We are monks. We have taken strict vows. We are not supposed to even look closely at women, let alone touch them, let alone carry them in our arms. Why on earth did you do that?"
He's been stewing on it the whole time.
The entire time, Tanzan looks at him calmly and replies, "I left the girl by the side of the road hours ago. Are you still carrying her?"
The psychological depth of that story is astounding. Tanzan responded to the pure necessity of the present moment. A person needed help, he provided it, and he immediately returned to a state of presence.
He just dropped it.
Aikido, however, missed the present moment entirely, because his mind, his ego, was violently clinging to the rules, the perceived grievance, and the moral outrage. His pain body was gorging itself on righteous indignation for 5 uninterrupted hours.
Wow.
This scenario forces us to ask a crucial question. How do we become so deeply entangled with this pain body that we actually mistake this accumulation of emotional baggage for our authentic identity?
Because as Tolle points out, the ego is fundamentally structurally schizophrenic.
It absolutely is. Tolle explains that the ego survives by splitting our consciousness into two distinct conceptual entities. There is I, and there's my life.
Okay, explain that.
The moment we accept this split, we begin to believe that we have a life, treating it as a possession that we must control, manage, and protect from being lost. We fail to realize the underlying truth that we do not have a life. We are life itself.
We are life itself.
When you casually say, my life is a complete mess right now, you have neurologically severed yourself from the flow of existence. You have turned your own existence into an object that you are now in conflict with. This profound delusion of separateness is the soil in which the pain body grows.
It makes me visualize the pain body as a dormant volcano sitting inside your chest. To the outside observer, it looks completely quiet. You might go weeks without an outburst, but beneath the surface, it is actively, hungrily looking for an excuse to erupt.
Always hunting.
It is waiting for the slightest, most mundane trigger. Your partner forgets to take out the trash, or a stranger cuts you off in traffic. The event itself is a 2 out of 10 on the stress scale, but the pain body seizes the opportunity. Boom.
Corruption.
The volcano erupts, spewing out old, disproportionate rage that has absolutely nothing to do with the trash or the traffic. It's just using the minor trigger as an alibi so it can feed on the resulting adrenaline and interpersonal drama.
What's terrifying is that when the pain body takes the wheel, the conscious you isn't even in the room anymore.
No, you're gone.
The pain body speaks through your vocal cords, intentionally selecting words it knows will maximize the pain in the other person. Why? Because it wants to trigger your partner's pain body to wake up and fight back. It wants to provoke a reaction so the two pain bodies can mutually feed off the negative energy exchange.
Okay, I have to jump in and debate this, because this is where the spiritual theory clashes violently with practical reality for a lot of people.
Okay, let's hear it.
Tanzan dropping the girl and walking away is a lovely metaphor. But if we are constantly told to drop the past, how do we protect ourselves from being victimized? If someone abuses me or a business partner steals from me, I need my memory of that pain to ensure I don't let them do it again.
Right.
If I drop the past and stay in the blissful present, aren't I just making myself a gullible target for toxic people? Doesn't the pain body serve a protective function?
It is the most common and understandable resistance to this teaching. The ego equates dropping the past with total vulnerability. But Tolle argues that true intelligence and the establishment of firm, practical boundaries does not require the heavy, toxic machinery of the pain body.
Okay.
Consider a hot stove. You don't need to harbor a deep emotional resentment toward the stove to know that it will burn you.
That's true.
You don't need to write a journal entry about how the stove betrayed your trust. You simply use the factual memory of the heat to inform your present action. You don't touch the stove. It is a clean, emotionless boundary.
So you're saying we can retain the practical data without keeping the emotional charge?
Exactly. If you are dealing with a highly toxic or manipulative person, you can clearly recognize their unconscious, egoic behavior. You can use your practical memory to say, this person's patterns are harmful to my well-being. And in the present moment, you can establish an impenetrable boundary. You can walk away, you can sever a contract, you can say no, but you do it cleanly. You don't need to carry a heavy, simmering emotional burden of victimhood to validate the boundary.
I see.
In fact, reacting from your pain body, screaming at them, trying to punish them, looping resentful thoughts, usually just tangles you more deeply into their drama. You become energetically linked to the abuser. Setting a boundary from a place of clear, unclouded, emotionless presence is infinitely more powerful and protective than screaming from a place of pain.
That is a staggering difference in approach. It's practical learning versus emotional clinging. So I invite the listener to test this in their own life. Think about the last time you felt a surge of intense, disproportionate anger over a minor inconvenience. A delayed flight, a spilled cup of coffee, a misunderstood text message.
It happens to all of us.
Was that the authentic you assessing a problem and solving it? Or was your pain body just jumping at the chance for a quick, cheap meal of cortisol and drama? Recognizing that difference in real time is an absolute game changer.
It changes the entire trajectory of your emotional life. But recognizing the pain body requires a specific vantage point. If our default state is being trapped in the dense noise of our ego, bouncing between the anxieties of the future and the grievances of the past, what is the actual escape route?
How do we get out?
Where do we go to find this clarity? Tolle's answer is radically simple, yet incredibly difficult for the modern mind to grasp. The escape route isn't a new thought. It is the space between the thoughts.
Which brings us to the core mechanism of awakening in Tolle's work. He distinguishes between two fundamentally different ways of experiencing reality: object consciousness and space consciousness.
To understand this, we have to look at how we currently operate. The vast majority of humanity spends their entire lifespan exclusively trapped in object consciousness.
Just focusing on things.
Right. This means their awareness is entirely captivated by the things in their lives. They only perceive the foreground, the physical objects, the tasks on the to-do list, the passing emotions, the endless stream of thoughts. Tolle quotes Winston Churchill to describe this state perfectly.
Oh, what did he say?
Churchill once described history as one damn thing after another.
That is so accurate.
For most people, that isn't just history. That is the moment-to-moment experience of their daily lives, a relentless conveyor belt of objects and problems demanding attention.
The analogy Tolle uses to break this open is stunningly elegant. He asks us to consider the night sky. When you step outside on a clear, dark night and look up, what does your brain immediately register?
The stars.
You see the stars, the planets, maybe the moon, a passing satellite. You see the glowing objects. But what you completely and utterly ignore is the vast, infinite, staggering emptiness of the black space itself, the background.
Yeah.
Yet without that immense nothingness, without the space to hold the stars could not exist. They wouldn't be visible. The space is the prerequisite for the objects.
Translating that to our internal experience, that vast holding space is our pure awareness. It is the silent background of consciousness upon which our noisy thoughts appear. Tolle shares a classic Zen story to demonstrate how to shift from the objects to the space. A Zen master and his eager disciple are walking through a dense mountain forest. The disciple is desperate. He keeps asking, "Master, how do I enter Zen? How do I achieve enlightenment? Give me the secret."
Like we all want the quick fix.
Exactly. Yeah. They stop to eat a silent meal, and afterward, the disciple begs again. The master sits in absolute silence for a long time, letting the disciple's anxious thoughts settle. Finally, the master speaks. He asks, "Do you hear the sound of that mountain stream in the distance?"
Okay.
The disciple stops his internal chatter, strains his ears, listens past the rustling leaves, and finally says, "Yes, I hear it." The master points his finger in the direction of the water and says, "Enter Zen from there."
Enter Zen from the listening. It wasn't about the stream itself. It was about the alert, highly attentive stillness required within the disciple to perceive the faint sound. That internal stillness, that pause in the thought stream, is the inner space.
To help cultivate this spatial awareness in daily life, Tolle resurrects an ancient piece of wisdom, often associated with Nufi traditions. The ring inscription, "This too will pass."
We hear that all the time.
Normally in our culture, we only deploy this phrase when we are in the depths of misery. We use it as a life raft to comfort ourselves when things are terrible. But the profound liberating power of this phrase is unlocked when you apply it to the good times.
The good times.
When you are at the peak of success, when you fall in love, when you buy the dream house, you look at it and realize this too is a temporary form. It will eventually pass.
Some might hear that and think it sounds incredibly depressing. Why ruin a good moment by reminding yourself it will end?
Because it actually does the exact opposite. It brings a profound detachment, which allows for true joy. When you realize the transient nature of a good situation, you stop gripping it so tightly. You stop being terrified of losing it.
Oh, because the ego is always afraid of losing what it has.
Exactly. The ego ruins joy, because the moment it gets what it wants, it immediately begins experiencing the anxiety of potential loss. By accepting impermanence, you free yourself to fully, deeply enjoy the pleasures of the world while they are here, because you are no longer demanding that they provide you with a permanent sense of identity.
Okay, so philosophically, space consciousness sounds beautiful, but let's get incredibly practical. How does a normal person, sitting in traffic, late for work, with a screaming toddler in the backseat, actually find this inner space?
It's the ultimate test.
Tolle provides a few biological hacks for the brain to bypass the ego. One is conscious breathing. He points out a fascinating neurological bottleneck. You literally cannot be engaged in compulsive, stressful thinking while simultaneously being fully 100% consciously aware of the physical sensation of your breath.
It's biologically impossible.
The human brain cannot fully attend to both. If you pour all your awareness into the feeling of the air moving over your vocal cords and expanding your ribs, the thought stream is forced to pause.
The second, highly effective tool he offers is feeling the inner body.
Yes, the inner body.
This involves withdrawing your attention from the external world and the internal dialogue and flooding it into your physical form.
Right.
If you close your eyes right now, How do you know your hands are still there?
Because I can feel them.
You can't see them, but you can feel a subtle, vibrating aliveness inside them. You can feel the energy in your feet, your chest, your legs. By intentionally anchoring your attention in that internal biological energy field, you are literally starving the thinking mind of the energy it needs to sustain its anxiety loop.
So if we practice this and we start accessing this inner space, what does this actually mean for how we conduct our lives? What is the practical output of this state?
It culminates in a philosophy that Tolle summarizes as not minding what happens. And we must tread carefully here because this is arguably the most misunderstood concept in modern spiritual literature.
Why is it misunderstood?
To the ego, not minding what happens sounds like passive weakness. It sounds like becoming a doormat and letting people abuse you. But that is a complete misinterpretation. It does not mean you lack preferences or that you don't take action. It means cultivating an inner state of non-resistance to the isness of the present moment.
Right.
If it is raining and you wanted it to be sunny, you don't waste cognitive energy complaining about the rain. You accept the reality of the water falling from the sky. This immediate acceptance instantly denies psychological time its power over you.
I picture space consciousness like the experience of reading a book. When you read, your entire focus is locked onto the black ink, the words, the plot, the characters, the drama. But imagine if, for just a second, you shifted your perception and you suddenly noticed the vast expanses of white paper underneath the text.
Wow. Yeah.
You realize that the thrilling story only exists and is only legible because the blank, silent page is there to hold the ink. Finding inner space is the realization that you are not the dramatic story written in the ink. You are the indestructible blank page.
That is a phenomenal synthesis of the concept. But the trick and the paradox of this entire endeavor is that you cannot approach the blank page like a goal.
You can't try to get there.
The ego loves to turn enlightenment into an object to be achieved. If you sit down on a meditation cushion and think, I am going to meditate forcefully for 30 minutes so I can attain peace, you have already failed.
Because peace is now a future object.
Exactly. You have turned peace into a future object, which means you are operating in time, which means you are operating as the ego. Enlightenment is the background of consciousness itself. It's already here, perfectly intact, beneath the noise. You can't hunt for it. You can only allow it to reveal itself by deciding to stop the noise.
I hear that, but I have to throw another major pushback your way. I am struggling with the implications of not minding what happens. Isn't this philosophy just a recipe for utter apathy and societal collapse?
I get this question all the time.
If I truly do not mind what happens, why would I ever get out of bed? If I don't mind that my government is corrupt, why would I vote or protest? How do we build a life, sustain a career, or fight for a better society if we are just passively observing the present moment and accepting whatever happens? Doesn't progress require dissatisfaction with the status quo?
That is the ultimate defense mechanism the ego deploys to keep you trapped. The mind operates on a deeply flawed assumption. It assumes that effective action requires stress, anger, wanting, and dissatisfaction as fuel.
Right.
The ego says, if I'm not angry about the corruption, I won't fight it. But Tolle argues that action born out of dissatisfaction, anger, or a desperate need to fix things is fundamentally tainted by that negative frequency.
It's infected.
If you fight corruption with hateful reactive anger, you might tear down the corrupt system, but you will inadvertently rebuild a new system infected with the exact same hostility. History is replete with violent revolutions that merely replace one set of tyrants with another.
Which goes back to what we were saying earlier about communism and utopias.
Exactly. Tolle insists that action born out of a deep, grounded alignment with the present moment is infinitely more powerful. You can see societal injustice, accept that it is currently happening without throwing an internal tantrum, and then take fierce, decisive, compassionate action to correct it. The intelligence of life flows through you when you aren't constricting it with your own pain body.
Let's actually put this to the test right now. I want the listener to try this.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, just stop for 3 seconds. Focus solely, intensely on the physical sensation of the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, and leaving. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Did you notice how for that tiny fraction of a second, your constant nagging mental chatter completely stopped?
It just vanishes.
There was no anxiety about tomorrow, no regret about yesterday, that brief, silent, weightless pause that is your inner space. And acting from that place of clarity rather than the noise changes everything.
And finding that space perfectly addresses your concern about apathy. Because finding inner space doesn't result in you moving to a cave and staring at a wall for the rest of your life. It fundamentally alters the quality of the action you take in the world. which leads us into the final major framework of the book, awakened doing and the creation of a new earth.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Tolle brings the spiritual down to the practical by distinguishing between two distinct types of purpose in our lives: inner purpose and outer purpose.
The distinction is vital. Your inner purpose is primary, and it is identical for every single human being on the planet. Your purpose is to awaken. It is to become conscious, to anchor presence in the now.
An outer purpose.
Your outer purpose is secondary, and it is entirely fluid. It changes constantly depending on your stage of life. Your outer purpose might be your career as an accountant, your role as a mother, your hobby as a painter, or your goal to build a business. The tragic, universal mistake humanity makes is trying to extract absolute, lasting fulfillment from the outer purpose. Because outer purposes are subject to the laws of the physical universe, they are bound by time, decay, and impermanence.
They don't last.
A business can fail, children grow up and leave, bodies age. If your identity is hitched to the outer purpose, you will inevitably suffer.
But when you invert the priority, when you make your inner purpose of remaining present the absolute foundation of your life, you enter what Tolle calls awakened doing. You still act in the world, but the quality of the action is transformed, and he outlines 3 specific modalities for awakened doing. You must ensure that whatever you are doing falls into one of these 3 states.
And they are very distinct.
The first is acceptance. Let's be real, life requires us to do things we don't naturally enjoy. If you were changing a profoundly gross diaper at 3 a.m. or sitting at a desk filling out a tedious tax form, you probably aren't ecstatic about it.
Probably not.
But if you can't enjoy it, you must at least accept that this is what the present moment requires of you. You bring a quiet, surrendered energy to the task. You perform the action cleanly, removing the internal monologue complaining about how unfair it is that you have to do it.
The second modality is enjoyment. Now, this is not the egoic thrill of winning a competition or acquiring a new toy. It is a much subtler, deeper frequency. It is finding genuine joy in the simple beingness of the action itself, regardless of the outcome.
So the act itself.
Whether you are sweeping the floor, writing code, or cooking a meal, the action itself becomes a vehicle for consciousness. You enjoy the movement, the focus, the flow.
And the third, the most dynamic modality, is enthusiasm. This is what happens when deep enjoyment is combined with a dynamic goal or a grand vision. And this is a massive, but it is enthusiasm completely stripped of the ego's desperate wanting.
Huge difference.
You might be building a massive tech startup, but you aren't doing it because you are desperately trying to manifest $1 billion to finally prove to your father that you are worthy. You are simply acting as a clear, unobstructed conduit for creative energy flowing into the world. The joy is in the creation, not the eventual IPO.
Tolle introduces a beautiful concept here regarding people who live in these modalities. He calls them frequency holders.
I love that term, frequency holders.
These are individuals whose outer purpose might seem entirely mundane, even invisible, to a society obsessed with status and ego.
Mm-hmm.
They might be the person quietly shuffling papers in the back office, the janitor sweeping the subway station, or the barista making coffee.
Yeah.
But because they perform these seemingly ordinary tasks with absolute unclouded presence, profound kindness, and total acceptance, they're literally anchoring the frequency of pure consciousness into the collective human grid.
Wow.
From a spiritual perspective, they are arguably doing vastly more to heal the world than a highly stressed, ego-driven, reactive world leader who is allegedly trying to fix the planet.
And this naturally bridges to Tolle's ultimate assertion, the title of the book itself, The New Earth. It is so critical to understand that Tolle is not painting some futuristic, sci-fi utopian vision where technology eventually solves world hunger and we all live in floating eco-cities.
No, not at all.
Looking to the future for salvation is the ultimate trap of the ego. It just perpetually delays peace. The new earth is not a place in the future. It is a state of consciousness arising right now in this exact moment through awakened human beings. He reinterprets the famous beatitude from Jesus, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Tolle suggests that the word meek does not mean weak or subservient. It translates to the egoless.
The egoless.
The egoless will inherit the earth simply because they are the only ones not actively trying to possess it, dominate it, or destroy it.
He draws a truly brilliant parallel between human consciousness and astrophysics to explain this evolution. If you look at the life cycle of the universe, it operates on a massive breadth, expansion and contraction.
Okay, expansion and contraction.
The universe is currently expanding, the outgoing movement of life. In human terms, this aligns with youth, building forms, creating businesses, and the energy of enthusiasm. But eventually, the cosmos will begin the return movement. It will contract back into the unmanifested source.
Which in human life is.
In a human life, this aligns with old age, physical decline, surrender, and the dissolution of the physical form. Our suffering comes from our egoic demand that we only ever experience expansion. We worship youth and growth, and we are terrified of the return movement.
We fight it so hard.
We have to learn to honor both cycles without egoic resistance. The profound danger is having a massive outer purpose, a huge expansion that is totally disconnected from your inner purpose of presence. As the proverb warns, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Without presence, even our attempts to save the world will just create more suffering.
It makes me think of a dancer. If you watch a beautiful ballet, the purpose of the dance isn't to finish the routine as quickly as possible so the dancer can reach a specific piece of tape on the far side of the stage. The purpose is the dance itself, unfolding step by step in the present moment.
Exactly.
If the dancer is only mentally focused on the final pose, their current movements become rushed, clumsy, and stressful. They ruin the dance by trying to get to the end of it.
Precisely. The step you are taking right now is the only step that actually exists.
Yeah.
The future pose is a phantom.
But I'm going to challenge Tolle one last time on behalf of everyone living in the gritty reality of the modern economy. He drops a line that sounds incredibly profound. You cannot manifest what you want. You can only manifest what you already have.
That's a tough one for a lot of people.
It sounds great on a retreat in Bali, but how does that actually work for a single mother who is stressed out, broke, looking at a mountain of debt, and just trying to figure out how to pay her rent next week so she and her kids don't end up on the street? You're saying she should just accept the present moment of extreme poverty. Doesn't she need to worry about the future to survive?
That is the most grounded, urgent question we can ask,
Yeah.
and it deserves a serious answer. Tolle is absolutely not denying the physical reality that the rent needs to be paid. He's not saying just smile and let the eviction happen.
Okay, good.
What he is diagnosing is the mechanism of problem solving. When that mother looks at the rent bill and panics, what is happening biologically? Her ego initiates a fight or flight response. Cortisol floods her system. Her amygdala hijacks her brain, and her prefrontal cortex, the center of logic, creativity, and expansive thinking, literally shuts down.
So she can't even think clearly.
Approaching the rent money from a state of internal lack, anxiety, and terror severely constricts her intelligence and her ability to act effectively. She is paralyzed by the noise of her own fear.
So the fear isn't actually helping her find the money, it's blinding her to potential solutions.
Exactly. By accepting the present moment, which means saying, okay, the reality is I do not have the rent money right now. I feel the fear, but I am not the fear. She stops fighting the reality of the situation.
She drops the resistance.
This immediate acceptance drops her out of the ego's panic loop and into inner space. In that space of clarity, true creative solutions exist. Her prefrontal cortex comes back online. She might suddenly think of a resource she hasn't tapped, a friend she can call, or a side job she can secure. She still takes immediate, forceful action to get the rent money, but the action is empowered by grounded clarity, not crippled by frantic fear.
It's the difference between thrashing in the water and drowning versus relaxing your body so you can float and see the shoreline.
That's exactly it, floating instead of drowning.
So to synthesize all of this, I want you to ask yourself a diagnostic question right now as you listen. Look at whatever you're doing at this exact moment. Are you treating this present moment as an obstacle you have to overcome to get to a better moment? Are you treating it merely as a means to an end? Or worse, are you treating right now as an enemy?
That is the ultimate question.
Your honest answer to that question will instantly determine whether you are living from the grip of your ego or whether you are operating from true awakened presence.
And that diagnostic is precisely why A New Earth matters so profoundly, even years after its publication. It is essential, mandatory reading for anyone who is simply exhausted by the relentless demands of their own mind. If you feel like you are running on an endless, accelerating treadmill of wanting, achieving, accumulating, and yet you are still plagued by an underlying sense of emptiness, this book provides the blueprint for the off-ramp.
It gives you the tools to ground your daily, mundane actions in a profound, unshakable peace. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today as you go back into the world. Tolle talks extensively about aligning with the present moment. But consider this implication. What if the most radical, dangerous, rebellious act you can possibly commit in today's hyper-anxious, perpetually outraged, attention-driven society isn't going out and forcing the world to change to fit your preferences?
What if it's something entirely different?
What if true power isn't about control at all, but simply deciding to stop fighting this exact moment? What if absolute surrender to right now is the ultimate revolution?
Powerful, paradigm-shifting thought to carry with you into the week.
Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation here in the Book Nook. If you want to keep exploring the books that shape our world, challenge our assumptions, and expand our minds, make sure you subscribe so you never miss a deep dive into the literature that matters.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one,